So hello, everyone. This is Otessa, and you are listening to Conversations with Hysterical Women. That's Women with an X, the Hysterical Women podcast, where you are all welcome here, friends, allies, everywhere across the rainbow, across the binary. I'm just really glad to have you be here. And this is meant to be a safe space to explore all of the weird things that life throws at us and all of the different ways in which we can be twisted and torn asunder, but also all the different ways that we can come back together. So thank you for listening, and I'm glad that you're here. And going to be cheesy, but comment, like, subscribe.
Hi, I'm Shelly Dax, and you're listening to the Hysterical Women podcast with an X.
That was so perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. Awesome. So I know that, Diana, you will need to leave us because you have other things. So, but one thing that we were so curious about and would love to know is how you found out about us.
Actually, there's a tattooer in, I want to say, Washington, D.C. named Imani K. Brown.
Oh, Imani. Okay.
Yeah.
I know Imani.
Yeah. And I can't remember. I saw something on her.
Oh my gosh. She did Jade's Ink.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Imani. She was at DC Web Fest 7.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So she was on the Tattoo Sisterhood Revolution that I recorded. I interviewed her, and she was amazing and awesome and funny. And anyway, then when I saw, she mentioned your podcast or something about hysterical women, and I was like, oh, that sounds wonderful.
Well, thank you for reaching out to us.
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
Thank you.
And I love that. And what was the event that you were both attending again?
Well, it was a virtual interview series, and it was called the Tattoo Sisterhood Revolution. And I also used Women with an X in my subtitle.
Very cool. And where can people find that, or did that already happen?
Well, it already happened, but I'm releasing episodes by the week on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So they can find you at Shelly Dax on YouTube?
Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I look forward to checking that out very, very much.
Yeah.
So when you reached out, I was immediately really interested in this idea as a topic, for lots of different reasons.
Okay, sure.
And then kind of coming from there, wanted to hear what your experience was before the Rona, during the Rona, all of the above.
Sure, absolutely.
Like, this is such a wild time. But in particular, something that I have always thought was really interesting about the tattoo and body art world is the misconception that women are not big players in this, or that they are newcomers, and that's just patently and historically so wrong.
Right, you are correct.
Yeah, and it's like a really lost history. And I remember like being aware of that in some way, but then even when you try to do the research, it's almost like the historical records are really very poor. At least in my experience, when you're trying to find things. And when I was doing a little bit of research about this before we spoke, I realized, so side note, back before the legislature around piercing really became as robust as it is now, in high school, I was an apprentice piercer as an after-school job, which they don't let you do that anymore.
Right.
But I remember when suddenly the laws changed. But when I was looking up, kind of, because I was like, tell me more about the history and the legislature of this in the U.S. And I was fascinated to find out that tattoos were illegal in New York City from 1963 to 1997. And they weren't legal in Oklahoma until 2006. And just all kinds of weird and arcane rules. Like, Massachusetts, it wasn't legal until 2000 when the ACLU became involved. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, wait a second. I thought it was kind of like the Wild West and there wasn't any legislature. And you just went and you got this thing done. And then somewhere around like 2000s, they started cracking down. And then I realized that no, my sense of what the law was really incorrect. And that to me, and then I started going down a rabbit hole and realizing that I should talk to an expert. So I'm glad that I'm talking with you. But that was something that I was just like, what on earth is happening here?
Got it. Okay. So I am not as up on the history as you are, apparently. History
Well,
of the legislation, at least.
Weird, because I'm like, you could definitely get a tattoo in New York City
Yeah.
before
Oh, yeah.
1997.
Of course, yes. Well, the truth is, of course, there's tons of people that are tattooing under the table all the time, whether they're licensed or not. So that's always happening.
Yeah.
Yes. So are we just jumping in? Are we going?
Oh, yeah. Well, so that was just something that I was thinking about. I was thinking about how women have been erased from history in this area. And then when I started going down a little like internet rabbit hole, I was like, wait a second. I didn't realize that our ruling was actually way more convoluted than I ever realized.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, so I wonder what the licensing process for you was, what your experience was like coming into this art form.
Yeah.
And then also everything else that you would like to speak about. And Diana, also, if you need to leave at any point, please just let us know. I don't want to keep you.
Okay, awesome. I'll be on mute, but I'll be working on other stuff in case tech issues arise.
Thank
I'll
you
be
so
able to
much,
help you guys
Diana.
out. Okay, and thank you again, Shelly. We appreciate you.
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just jump in with the stuff that I understand about the laws as they stand now. I'm more up on the educational side of things.
Okay, then we can definitely start with that. That was something that I was just so flummoxed by.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so weird. But I would love to hear your origin story and the educational element as well. We don't need to necessarily talk about that.
Well, I do find it very fascinating too. Now you've sparked an interest in me going and trying to figure this out as well. But anyway,
I would love to know from someone who actually knows what they're doing, because I just thought, I was like, oh, that's an interesting link. And the next thing I know, I'm on this like really long internet, like Alice in Wonderland, just diving down.
Well, women have been involved in tattooing for a long time, as well as, ancient peoples and that kind of thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really been America itself that's, been part of the challenge in that regard. But so my understanding is that there are about 4 states that require tattoo school. And then most of the other states, it's the traditional apprenticeship method, as well as many of the other countries in the world. So they still have the traditional apprenticeship style. Now that there's probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 states in the US that actually have some sort of regulation around what it means to have an apprenticeship. But then most of the states, probably 40-50% really have nothing. So it's very loosey-goosey, and it's really up to the individual shop owner / tattoo mentor to, get to say what they're going to do and what they're going to include in apprenticeship. So there is reasons why for years people have just stuck with that idea of apprenticeship, and a lot of old schoolers think that tattoo school is ridiculous and should be shut.
Yeah.
So yes. And so here's the thing. Now, in the state that I live in, which is Oregon, it is required to go to tattoo school. We're one of 4 states where you have to go to tattoo school. So when I first decided to go to tattoo school, or when I first started thinking about tattooing, I didn't know anything about it, obviously, at all. And so when I found out, you have to go to tattoo school, well, that was my first experience here.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I did. And so then over time, I started to discover more and more and more. Oh, wait, this isn't what everybody has to do. This is totally different.
Yeah.
And then I started to hear more and more stories about people who suffered through traditional apprenticeships. Yes. And so if we want to talk about that. So when I did the Tattoo Sisterhood Revolution interview series, part of that was to bring to light the way people are getting educated in this industry. And so I was able to talk, and I really wanted to focus on women's experience.
Yeah.
And so, I got to talk to some incredible and wonderful artists, and many of them did have not great experiences when it comes to going through an apprenticeship.
Because is it correct that the apprenticeship, you were saying it's really under the terms of your mentor or the shop in which you are apprenticing, and there isn't really any or will not, one place might be wildly divergent from the next. Is that correct?
Yes. And there's really no regulation about that, like an overall anything federal or anything, at the state level, there are some, but nothing that's really sort of an overall overarching way of learning.
Yeah.
And so what my biggest concern is that leaves it open to individuals being emotionally and some physical, but sexual abuse and harassment and that kind of thing, which is what I was really wanting to speak out about. Mm-hmm. Because even though for me, I went to tattoo school almost 15 years ago, and at that time, tattoo schools had been pretty new. Maybe they'd only been around for maybe 5 to 6 years before that. So it was still coming off of the old school apprenticeship idea. So when I did go to tattoo school, even in Oregon, it still was a pretty crummy experience. The biggest part of what was difficult for me is I was 38, maybe 39. I can't even remember. I think 38. And so I was the oldest person there. And there were everybody else, and there were probably 6 or 7 students between the ages of 18 and 25. So I was the oldest person there. And the guy that was our main instructor, his name was Creeper. His nickname was Creeper.
Oh, no.
And it was true. And I had already been at the University of Oregon. I'd already been in, real school. So I was expecting it to be professional because it was regulated by the state. But it really was a very difficult situation. And this man, on the very first day of school, said something like, well, he was trying to set up a mobile tattoo studio, and he was telling us about it. And it was a new idea at the time. Mm-hmm. And his very first thing was, if anybody steals my ideas, I'm going to stab you in the eye.
Oh, that's delightful.
Right? Yeah,
that's really delightful.
Day of school, there you go. So, and then of course, the other aspect of it was because there were a couple of guys working at the shop too, and they were all sort of helping with training. They all in their stations, in their own tattoo stations, had loads of pictures of naked women hanging up, right? Because that was sort of just what you expected in the old days. But it was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make me feel comfortable. I can't imagine this making anybody else feel very comfortable either, right? So there's just an interesting, at least there was an interesting expectation of what it means to be a man tattooer in this world. So that was challenging, because I think also being in school, being older, being a lot more self-assured and that kind of thing, I was looking around going, this is ridiculous. What, and the training, what they called curriculum, was a bunch of poorly copied pages, that you could barely read, slapped together. It was pretty bad. And another time that I was there, the guy took my machine apart completely, which the old school coil machines have a lot of working parts, little screws and all kinds of things. And I hadn't even learned how to put it back together yet, but he took it apart, set it on my station. I had clients coming in and he's like, "Okay, put it back together." It's like, well, you only showed us once and I don't know how to do that, So just stuff like that. Now my experience wasn't even that bad, to be honest. I've heard from so many other people that theirs was way worse than what I went through. And we're talking about there almost being like a tradition that you should be treated harshly and almost militaristic before you earn the right to pick up a tattoo machine. And that still goes on to this day. And a lot of the people that I've talked to even live in, other countries, England and New Zealand or whatever, they've described very similar situations. But also one of the biggest challenges is being a young woman in this industry and, going into a shop like that. And you're literally kind of in a position where you have to beg to get in anyway and somehow prove yourself and prove that you're worthy of this kind of training. And that's also pretty harsh. But then also you're looking up to this tattoo mentor who is, more experienced and older than you. And if it's a man and he's older, I've heard many, many times that you also have to put up with the sexual comments constantly, just degrading things, just being treated crappy, all of that. And I just got a small taste of that in my situation.
it seems like even though we don't have what an apprenticeship looks like, there are no rules or regulations and real protections as a worker in that environment. But it also seems like the experience at tattoo school, even to this day, is still kind of toxic.
You know, it really depends. So I own a tattoo school and I've been teaching for about 8 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so one of my goals, of course, when I started was I absolutely want to have an amazing, comfortable environment, particularly for newcomers and women and older people or whatever. So it's not like, I mean, but I'm not saying that all of the schools in Oregon or anywhere else are necessarily great either. You know, I don't know. And I've heard stories and things, but, you know, it is changing. So at least what I'm trying to do is changing at least the people that I get to deal with, you know.
Yeah.
But it is unfortunate that there aren't more regulations in place to protect people, because it does tend to be younger women that get taken advantage of as far as that goes, you know. But then also just in general, I've heard from a lot of people that there's so many stories, but you know, that they actually went to work for somebody and they were promised to be taught, and you know, they had to do a lot of chores and running errands and doing this and that for the owners. Yeah. And eventually either didn't get anything out of it, or it was very poor, and you know, they ended up working their asses off because they thought they were going to get something, but literally ending up being free labor constantly.
Wow.
Free labor, you know, and that's really sad too. So recommendation to most people is, if you feel at all like it's not a comfortable environment, don't put up with, you know, being treated poorly.
Yeah.
You know, get out of there, find someplace better. Another thing that I heard a lot when I talked to these women was women of color or women that are like, say, genderqueer or something like that, also have a more difficult time getting an apprenticeship in a lot of areas. It really depends on who owns the shops, you know.
Yeah.
And I've also had people reach out to me either through the interview series, or I also have an email list. And then I also have written a book. So I've had people reach out to me from the book saying, help, I can't find an apprenticeship. People keep rejecting me. I don't know what to do.
Wow.
You know,
and what is the name of your book?
It's actually called The Tattoo Textbook.
Okay, awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. And so it's been out for about a year, and it's based on the years that I've been teaching. And because another thing was there just really wasn't a lot out there for beginning tattooers. And here's a weird thing that happens kind of in the industry, where it's like this expectation that you have to go around to different shops and beg for an apprenticeship. And you have to, you know, I don't know what it is. It's very weird that there's like this strange expectation. Now it is changing. And a lot of the people I've talked to would like to be better tattoo mentors. You know, they want a new way of doing things. But it's kind of sad that it's still happening all over the place. And people reach out to me. I had somebody from the UK reach out to me and say, I'm 52, or I think it's 52 years old. And I've been to like 10 shops and shown them my portfolio and stuff, but they just keep on telling me that I'm too old to get into the industry.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Which is ageism.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Nobody would tell you at 55 or 60 years old that you couldn't take up painting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is wild. And at what recourse does a person have? Because
that's the problem. They don't. Because of the fact that you're literally just walking into, most of the time, you're literally just walking into someone's tattoo shop and you're just saying, hey, please teach me how to tattoo. Right?
Wow.
So there is no recourse unless it's an official school like it is in Oregon. And then, of course, if somebody has a problem, they can report it to the state and have an investigation. But that's not typical. That's not typical anywhere else.
And so since people are going in, since the way that it's set up is that you go in and you ask to be taught, it's not like you're going in for a job interview. So you can't then say, hey, that's ageism. You can't exclude me from a job, because it's not a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
And it's like you're acting like, you know, I mean, they're acting like we're doing you a huge favor, which I'm going to say, I can't fault everybody. There are some amazing tattoo mentors out there. There are people who have had great apprenticeships, who the people do follow through with their word and they have done a great job. But that's the smaller percentage of what's actually happening.
And then also, if someone comes in and they show their portfolio, then that also makes me think, well, how do you build your portfolio if, well, I know in Ireland, you know, you can tattoo anyone, but in other places, are you doing this on yourself, on your friends, building up your portfolio to show someone until you can do it, quote unquote, like for a shop? What does that look like?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that it happens. So in our school, what we do, of course, is people start out working on grapefruits and then fake skin and then volunteer friends and family members. And that's just the way it is set up here in Oregon. That's kind of the way everybody does it. But in other areas, that's, sure, tattooing fake skin or pig skin or grapefruits or something like that.
Yeah.
And then eventually, when you get into a shop, then of course you have to find people that will volunteer to let you tattoo them. But what I've also heard from a lot of people is that when they do get in the situation, they're not doing that much tattooing. They're actually doing a lot of chores and running errands and, doing all the scut work. And that's kind of what's expected for some places I've heard, first couple of years, they have to do that before they can touch the machine.
Oh my gosh, that's so wild. So what would you like to see? I mean, this is like problematic from every single direction.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have started a school, what was that experience like in Oregon, and how difficult was it to get the licensing or whatnot? And is that something that you would recommend? And would you like to see other kind of satellites bloom from that?
So for me in the state of Oregon, when I tried to get my tattoo school license, it was right when they were changing a lot of the laws. So I was the first person to go through when they changed it. And that took a year. It was a lot of red tape and a lot of challenge. Now the process is much harder for people. Of course, COVID's affected everything, but before it still probably takes someone about a year to a year and a half to really do it. And I've had people reach out to me saying, help, I can't get licenses at school. I don't know what to do. It's a long process. It's very complicated. And so it's good on, for the fact that the students are better educated and stuff. I don't even think sometimes the newer people that come through even realize how bad things were in other places,
Right.
So now they're like, they don't have to see all of that. But in other places, I'm not necessarily saying that it has to be a school. I just think that whatever it is, apprenticeship or something, there should be some protection for people. There should be some recourse if some bad things are happening. There's a movement in the UK. They're talking, it's called Tattoo Me Too or Me Too Tattoo, I think it is. There's a couple of different people that host like Instagram accounts and stuff to address just the issue of sexual abuse in the tattoo industry. And we're talking about tattoo mentors abusing their apprenticeships too, so it's not good. It's pretty bad. Yeah. Obviously that's against the law no matter where you are. So but it's usually the challenge is the person's not going to speak up for a while, or maybe never.
Yeah. And that is the problem with, I think, so many people who set themselves up as mentors. Many of them do not have good intentions, and that's exactly why they set themselves up to be mentors.
Right. Yes. Unfortunately.
That is a really disturbing theme that I think hits home in
I've actually written a couple of blogs about this, and I actually have gotten a lot of haters from owning a tattoo school. So on, it's just very weird that like there are a lot of tattooers, mostly men. I would say like 95% men who've reached out and said very rude things, or you're just a scam, and way worse than that even.
Because them using free label for 3 years is so not a scam.
Yeah, well.
That's real legit.
Yeah, but it's weird. There is an attitude kind of in some people in the industry who are like, we should have to go through this really hard thing and it will make us a better artist or whatever. That's a very old notion. And I'm telling you, it's not true. I mean, I have watched some incredible artists come through our school, which our school is literally just a basic training,
Yeah.
but I've watched them come through and come out and do amazing things and be amazing artists. There's no need for people to be treated like slaves for a year before they're allowed to pick up a machine.
Yeah. And so this brings me to another question that I had not really thought of. If and I'm certain that in Oregon it's different from, say, in, you know, Maryland, DC, Virginia, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But to start a tattoo shop, you probably need to be licensed, correct?
It depends on where you live. Yes, that is true. You do have, at least in Oregon, yes, you do have to have a facility license. Yes.
Okay. And what is that facility license process like? Do you need to say or show a portfolio
No,
or
no.
have like clean hands, or I mean, I like a clean hands certificate, some kind of like business licensing that they have in some states?
Well, it's different between becoming a licensed tattoo artist and becoming a facility. So anyone can own a facility. You don't have to be a tattoo artist to own a facility.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
But there are still, you know, well, okay, so in Oregon, there's, you know, their laws and rules are very strict on tattooing. So you have to, you know, you have to learn all the stuff about bloodborne pathogens and cross-contamination, sanitation,
Yeah.
all of that. And if you're going to open a facility, you have to meet certain standards.
Right.
You have to have, say, like a hot and cold running water and, you know, like different things that. And so if you apply for a facility license, you have an inspector that comes out and makes sure that all of those things are met. Yes.
Okay. So that does sort of track with my understanding of like business licensing in some other places. But in terms of the tattooing license, what does that process look like?
Well, again, in Oregon, it's different. You have to go to tattoo school, 360 hours of training. Okay. You have to get a bloodborne pathogens. You have to do a first aid class. So you put in the time with the procedures and all of the theory and that kind of thing. And then when you're all finished, you take your certificate from the school, you go to the state, and then you have to take a licensing test at the state as well.
Okay.
But it's not that way in many places. Literally most 50%-ish of the states, all you have to do is take a bloodborne pathogens class and, you know, say that you're not going to tattoo anyone under 18. And that's like
wow, that's it.
The minimal. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So anyone who has done this, they're still in the unfortunate situation of then having to go shop to shop asking to be an apprentice.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And then, and then as you mentioned, the ageism and all of the other ways that people are discriminated against. It's amazing that, well, I admire and anyone's persistence in making it through a system that is so
it is a broken
torturous
system. It is. It's pretty challenging. And then, you know, in general, there is a lot of toxic masculinity in this. And even I even had 2 guys on the Tattoo Sisterhood Revolution. I interviewed 2 guys because they're both really, really supportive shop owners that have amazing, you know, people that work for them. Yeah. And they were even in agreement. Both of them had really horrible apprenticeships themselves, had to teach themselves so much, you know, just like I did. But they are supportive of like, let's change this in the industry, because both of them have traveled a lot more than I have and been to conventions and that kind of thing. And they both talked about, you know, how it is even out in the convention world, you know, how there is usually way more men. And to be honest, there are usually way more men shop owners. But there are loads of women coming out. But like you said, there's kind of a weird thing. It's like, where have all these women been all this time?
The fact that they've been here all this time, now that I know more about how the back end is working, I'm just like, hot damn.
Yeah, shocking.
That was a real hill to climb.
Yes, and most of the there's probably like 6 or 7 women that I interviewed that all own their own shops too, their own private studios. And one of the reasons was so that they could create the environment that they want, not the typical environment that people know, which, you know, if you just watch tattoo shows like LA Ink and whatever, Miami Ink, and, you know, TV shows that portray what tattoo studios are like, it, you know, there's, it's a certain way, we'll say. They portray it definitely very, very dramatic and very, you know, whatever. But, and I even remember watching some Miami Ink episodes where they were treating their apprentice in there so bad, always just, you know, no good, just jokes and just whatever, like making his life terrible. And that's what's on TV. So that's what people are seeing, you know. But that's reflected in the, you know, there's truth to that. But there are lots of amazing women who are coming out now and opening their own studios and making them private studios so they can spend time with their clients and really provide a much more comfortable environment. Dare I say, even a spiritual, you know, environment, really embracing the sacred side of this art form and that kind of thing too. So that's really nice to see. But then on the other hand, I mean, the change is great. Some of them are also afraid to take on apprentices and stuff like that, but some of them have started to. But then here's something that bugs me that kind of just shows the part that hasn't changed much is if you go on Google and you search tattoo magazines, and then you look and then click images, and then you just look down the page, down, scroll. It looks literally like soft pornography.
Yeah.
So there is that whole side of this too that is very odd to me that hasn't changed that much.
So what are some things that, for someone who is outside of the industry like myself, what are some things that we can do to help facilitate and affect change that would be positive?
You know, I think when it comes to clients, the biggest thing that would be helpful is just really research your artist and select ones that are doing a better job on that. And if you notice them treating their apprentice poorly in their shop while you're there, I would, try maybe not to frequent that place again. You don't necessarily have to say anything, but, or maybe you do if someone's brave enough.
Do you feel like, silly question, but do you feel like Yelp reviews and things like that are helpful in these areas?
I do, as long as it's constructive and not just a bunch of gossip, but like true things. Yeah, because one thing that is happening around here, even people are getting called out a lot more, which I think is part of what helps things change, of course. So it's good, on social media, it's so easy to sit back and just type a bunch of stuff and, and no one knows, is it really true? Who knows? But if you're really going to make a difference, I would say, yeah, do an honest review. Don't just get on the bandwagon.
Right.
Literally, if something happened to you, go ahead and share it and talk about it. And let other women know, even, especially if the shop is uncomfortable for them. I had a hairdresser the other day tell me that when she was at a shop, even here in Oregon, that she was there getting tattooed by someone, but then the shop owner came up and stood over them while she was getting tattooed and was like flirting with her and making jokes and this and that. And she said, I knew it was wrong and it didn't feel good, but I was getting tattooed and I couldn't just like jump up and run away.
Oh my God.
She also said, being younger, you also feel very intimidated by that, and she said, now I might have reacted differently. I might say something or whatever, but still, that's an uncomfortable place to be.
Yeah.
How do you just blurt out, get away from me, or please stop saying those things, without being then treated even more poorly? I don't know.
And then you're supposed to be staying still.
Yeah, and you're supposed to be sitting there.
I mean, I was just like, that is clearly an abuse of power, and that person probably does that as frequently as possible. Absolutely. Because of all of these reasons. And yeah, that is the sort of thing that's just unacceptable.
Yeah. I think speaking out is really the thing that's really going to change it, is people speaking up, refusing to be treated that way, and just continue the conversation as much as possible with other artists.
Yeah. And do you think that there should be some kind of standardization of what an apprenticeship looks like? Like, in terms of how many hours a week you will expect to have actual training, instead of it kind of being like, well, this week we might need you to do more cleaning and errand running, and then next week we'll do more.
Well, just judging by how we've done it, over the years, we've gotten it narrowed down even more, just really like, here's what we're doing every week. Here's the quizzes we're taking here. Of course, I think that works well, very well. So even if it's not regulated that you have to do that, I would recommend highly for tattoo shop owners who want to bring on apprenticeships to have structure and have a curriculum and let them know in advance exactly what they're going to get. You don't have to necessarily say, today we're putting in 3 hours on this, or that, but a general structure of what is expected of them, what's expected of you, as well as acknowledging that if they have a problem, there needs to be some way for them to talk to somebody.
Yeah. And so this is just so mind-boggling to me, because the whole guild structure, apprentice structure has been around for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, that's where our labor movement came from. And that's how we now have unions. And it seems like this is just something that was kept and considered so peripheral or niche that it never was included in that. And that sort of shocks me that there are no labor protections. And I know that everyone will have different ideas about unions, but this came from something that turned into something where there were labor protections, there were, rights and recourse, and in this industry, and also it seems very much so in the piercing industry, none of this translated over.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of swept under the rug. And then suddenly it was oh, well, I guess we'll need some licensing because we're worried about hepatitis, I guess, but we're still not really going to make sure that our workers are protected.
Yeah. It is very interesting. And I hate to say it needs to be federally regulated or whatever, because I know artists would probably balk at that idea. But I just think maybe there would, be some value to having some kind of a union or some kind of standards, at least that were federal. That would be interesting. I talked to someone in the UK, and he said it's very similar there as well. And he's working on, trying to present, at least to his college, the possibility of having a structured apprenticeship program for tattooing. And he was like, maybe we can work together and, do something in the US. I'm like, absolutely.
That's amazing.
I'm super open to trying to do something. You get a lot of lashback, a lot of people that are angry about it.
Wow. I mean, I can understand, not wanting government inside of every issue.
Yeah.
But if the system is broken, then trying to fix it yourself or maintain some kind of standards and then inspire other people to also uphold those standards. And it seems to me like it would actually be a good business practice, because the way it's kind of sounding right now is people who have the skill set that they have, right, which is going to be tattooing as an art form.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to have the expertise or know-how of small business ownership management, project management, and HR.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the system right now is kind of okay, well, that's great that you're an artist, but we also secretly expect you to be skilled at HR, know how to run a business, be able to manage products and timelines and clients and employees and all of the above. And it's just kind of well, wait, that's an expectation of how many other things that are unreasonable to expect. That's
sure.
Saying, you came in here, but we're actually going to expect you to be able to manage and maintain 7 hats, when it's really a 1-hat situation. And so it does seem like having guidelines where people get together and build something that is communally actually that's good. And I might not have thought of that because I'm not an HR person, or I'm not but that is a better sort of return on investment of everyone's time, and a place where everyone does feel safer. If you have a collection of people talking about how does this actually work in a way that serves both parties?
Yeah, that would be really interesting if there was something more like that. In the program that we have, we do talk a little bit about marketing and business and being an independent contractor, and what you have to do to promote yourself and help your clients, and offer the services and that kind of thing. And in my book, I talk about that too, but it doesn't take it nearly as far as it could go. And you're right.
Sounds like you're doing, which is really cool.
Well, I'm trying.
Yeah.
You know, I'm doing what I can in my small corner of the world, as well as speaking out like this on podcasts and really and writing blogs and talking about these issues and trying to engage other studio owners in the same thing. And I'm also in the process of working on a book. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it or anything, but something about how to be a tattoo mentor, like a good tattoo mentor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just to get that
Some
out
kind
there.
of blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is so mind blowing. So, on your end, so that in terms of what clients can do to be more supportive and inclusive and thoughtful in terms of helping to not just support artists, but also have their influence on an industry and changing in the way that it needs to. What do you think you would like to see other artists do or know or learn from each other?
Other artists, we've already started these conversations, and I love the fact that they're starting to really support each other.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit nervous in calling my interview series the Tattoo Sisterhood Revolution, but I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to do it because tell me what this feels like. Because I didn't want to exclude men per se, you know, because obviously I have two wonderful grown sons that are incredible men.
Yes.
You know, there are incredible men in this industry too. Absolutely. So I want to acknowledge that. But because women have suffered a lot, I wanted to, you know, just really address this. And as well as women with an X, you know, really support the idea that everybody has the right to learn. And so I guess it would be nice to see some of the what do you call it? I'm like, you know, just where women also sometimes tend to be a little bit more difficult to each other as well because of fear of, you know, somebody being better than them or prettier than them or, you know, whatever. If we could help work on eliminating a lot of that and just really reach out a hand and support each other. And, you know, I love so many of the women that I've talked to, for instance, like, I'm going to say a couple of names because they're fabulous people. Imani K. Brown, who's in DC, an amazing artist who just lives her own life and dresses crazy, and she's super fun. She's an incredible artist. People like her who are, you know, starting her own magazine and really reaching out to other people in the industry.
I didn't realize she was starting her magazine. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's called I think it's called Tattoo Shop Gal or something like that.
Very cool.
Anyway, she's awesome. You can follow her on Instagram. Michaela Rose, she's in New Zealand. She's incredible. Fantastic artist. Also has a private studio. And I think she may, let me see. I can't remember the lady, but there's one in the UK who started the Me Too tattoo movement. Mm-hmm. So check that out too. Just, you know, reach out and really support each other as artists and as clients. I mean, I think just you follow artists, support them, especially during the time of COVID where so many shops are ending up having to close for a while. If you want to support the people that are doing a really good job and really inclusive, with a more attitude towards looking to the future and progressing our industry, support those people by buying gift certificates or buying their art or their prints or, you know, and then maybe even schedule appointments for when the world opens back up again.
Yeah. So that
depends on where you live, right? But
definitely. So that's my sort of, and I apologize because I do need to be mindful of the time, but that is the last question that I really had for you, which is, in this pandemic, how can we make sure that this entire industry and all of its infrastructure are still being supported and that people are being held in some kind of safety?
Yeah. I mean, it's where I live, we're still open right now. Of course, we were closed for a while and we do have some stricter requirements. But the truth is about the tattoo industry is in general, I want to say, at least where I live and the people that we've taught, they already know a lot about cross-contamination and safety and sanitation. So I guess really increasing your knowledge of that, if you weren't taught that, is a number one. So being as we already knew a lot and we already protected ourselves with gloves and, you know, different things, this wasn't a hard transition for us to add masks and a few other things to really, you know, make it easier for the clients to come in. And
so in your place, you are still able to.
We are still open.
Yes. Okay.
In Oregon, we are. But I know of a lot of people who just recently had to close down again, though, after,
yeah.
you know,
So that's
closing and
what
then
I'm
reopening.
wondering about, is how to support those artists who are forced to stop working. Are there like Patreons where people like show, I mean, I'm curious, or can you buy other forms of art?
That would be what I would say too, is the biggest thing that people are doing is trying to expand what they're offering. So yes, definitely follow them on their social medias, because that's one way of really like creating an audience and having more people for their other projects. So YouTube, Instagram, those are the two main ones that tattoo artists use.
Okay.
Following them is great. Making comments, those are all really helpful too, being supportive. But honestly, monetarily, it would be gift certificates, making appointments in advance, even if you have to bump that back a few times. Buying some of their merch, you know, their t-shirts or whatever, anything else that can help support them. Perfect time at the holidays to really buy some awesome art from people. Most of the artists that I know are multi-talented, multi-dimensional, multimedia artists. So there's usually a lot to offer.
So if you can't, unfortunately, buy one type of art, then you can make an appointment for the future. You can still engage in support online, or buy another form of art or merch, all of the above, because that's something that is terrifying, is just where I am watching. I mean, it's going to be really hard and to make it through this, and the number of shops and all kinds of different industries that are gone for good.
It is unfortunate.
It's alarming. And this is something in particular where, I mean, if you can't operate, then how do you get by?
How do you make money? How do you get by? Absolutely. It's forcing many of my friends and everyone to really diversify, which I guess is a good thing.
Right. And then also knowing that we need to do the work of finding you in these new spaces.
Absolutely. And of course, social media is going to be the biggest way to search people out, you know? Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time. And
absolutely.
And also the tattoo textbook, I'm going to mention that as well. And we've been speaking with Shelly Dax. That is SHELLYDAX. So you can find her across all platforms and support her work and her textbook and her school through that. And I'm so fascinated by all of this. And thank you for making this change and also educating me about what change needs to happen.
Awesome. I really appreciate you having me on today. And I am definitely going forward with all kinds of amazing things to try to change this industry for the better.
Awesome. And so I'm going to be following and keeping up online, and I encourage everyone else to do that as well. So yes, thank you so much. This was very, very educational, very eye-opening. And
excellent.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a good look and go down some different rabbit holes now from the good advice that you just shared. So thank you so much.
Thank you for supporting hysterical women.
Thank you. And so it was the Tattoo Sisterhood Revolution?
Correct. And that's on YouTube.
Awesome. Okay. Fantastic.
All right, Otessa.
Take care and be well for the holidays and the new year.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.